Today's daf is daf Yud Dalid. Daf Yud Dalid. And basically, the last thing we had like 5 different ways of understanding the Mishnah. The last thing is we brought a brisa. We just daf Yud Dalid and we Amid Aleph, and we brought a brisa which seems to repudiate the pshat of Rabbi Lazar and Shmuel, who learned that the whole machlekes is where the Levi denies it, but the Levi admits it. We definitely give it back, and we're not worried that he paid off because he never paid up. And even if he denied it, the Rabbanan say that talking about the case we denied it, and that's why you don't give it back because he denied it. And we asked a question from a brayso which clearly says that even if they admitted it, we have a machlekes, and that's what we're up to. Now Shmuel says, Amar Shmuel, about 10 lines on the top of the page. Shmuel says, we're not going back to this brayso, we're going back to the Mishnah. He said, my time of the Rabbanan. Why did the Rabbanan say that you don't give it back, even if you don't give it back? Excuse me. If I'm not worried that the Levi paid it, if I'm not worried that the Levi paid back, so the Levi denies it. In my opinion, the Levi paid back. Then why didn't he rip it up? So obviously we don't believe the Levi. So why did the Rabbanan say even if there's no achrayis whatsoever? I'm going to say lo yachzer lo lazeh. Even if there's no achrayis, the only person you're going to collect from them, the kuchas are not going to be hurt. You're only collecting from the Levi directly. If we believe the Levi didn't pay it back, then why shouldn't you give it back to the Mav? Let the Mav collect again. So one shot is that we're worried. And I told you 3 possible concerns. One of them is not that he paid up, that he wrote the shtar, but he never used it, never activated it. So when the Levi denies it, he's not saying it's that I paid it back. He's saying that cost of lulav is loiva. However, Shmuel said, I'll give you another reason why the Rabbanan say you don't give it back. Achrayis is toy sefer. We are worried that we're worried that achrayis is toy sefer, which means that even though there's no written achrayis, it's not written any achrayis there, you can still collect from the lekuchas, and therefore we don't give it back because the Levi denies that he owes the money. Therefore, we don't give it back because it's not a question just from the Levi, it's also collecting from the Malbim. Amalei Rabba Bar Isi Rabbi Bar Avi. Rabba Bar Isi said to Rabbi Bar Avi, "Numi Amar Shmuel Hachi." That Shmuel say achrayis toy sefer. Now this concept that achrayis toy sefer means that even though it's not mentioned inside the contract that there's a lien on the properties, that he gives a guarantee when and so on and so forth, it's a sefer made a mistake, and it's always considered as if the lender, when he lent the money, assumed that there's a lien on all the properties. So what we have this all over Shas Achrayis Toy Sefer, according to those who hold that, and that's the halacha. What is the pshat? Is a big machlekes Rishonim. According to many of the Rishonim, Achrayis Toy Sefer means that they spoke about Achrayis, just the Sefer forgot to put it in. But if they never spoke about achrayis at all, in other words, during the whole discussion, the borrower never mentioned, or the lender never said to the borrower, by the way, I'm giving this money, but I want a security on all the properties. If he never mentioned that, never raised it, then there is no achrayis. The sefer, they ate him there. Then we say there's no achrayis. And others say no. No, in that case, achrayis means you heard them talk about it. Why didn't you put it down? So the sefer made an error. The other way of learning is no. Even if they did not speak about it, nobody lends money to security. It's an unwritten agreement. And achrayis sefer is, since halacha says that there's always an achrayis, he should have put it into the contract. So the sefer's mistake was he didn't know the halacha. So there's 2 ways to understand achrayis sefer. Another big machlekes in poskim is what happens properties that he bought after that event. Okay, I lent you money in Nisan, and in Tishrei I bought new properties. Are they meshubet alone? So if you wrote clearly and all future properties, I'm talking about. If you didn't put it in, what happens? Do future and big machlekes shaying as well, the Rashba and others. What happened? Anyway, so most of the question: how can it be? Did Shmuel say that these are the questions that the sefer needs to ask to the lender, the borrower? And he says as follows: he has to ask the seller to say, Shmuel said somebody sells a property to his friend. He said, okay, are you gonna guarantee him? He's like this, Shavach, you're gonna have to ask him, are you accepting that if the buyer improves the property and then one of your lenders comes and takes the property away from the buyer, that the buyer can turn it around to you and not only take back the money that he paid you for the field, but also all the investments he put in the field. So he bought the field for $100. He put in $50 worth of investments into the field. So if your Baal Chayv takes that field away, he can turn back to you and collect $150. Do you agree to that? So he asked the question about Shvach. Next question is, what do you call it? Shvach, the land improvement, and Shvar. Can he get, now that he collects, which properties of yours, which assets of yours can he take? Can he take the premium assets, not just the average Bainini? Because a Balchayv normally takes a Baini, an average field. Can he take from your best Shvar for your best field? And then we ask also, what do you call it? And then he asks, oh, Shibud. One of the questions is there a Shibud on all your properties? So you have to consult. What do you tell me? Achrayis to a Sefer Shmuel says these are the questions that you have to ask every time there's a sale. And a sale, sorry? The Sefer has to ask the Meicher, so what are your intentions there? I'm writing down the stuff. What are your intentions? But the Gemara, let us say, let's say, it's 2 times quoting Shmuel, was it nah? I don't like that. There's a difference between a document of a loan and like this. The lender's document, here we're talking about when a person is selling a property. What's Shmuel talking about here? When you're selling a property to a person, you have to add, by the way, when you're guaranteeing the sale. Do you want to include a lien on your properties if it's taken away, and blah, 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 blah. And those are the improvements, and do you want from me idiots? But when you're writing a shtar halva, nobody lends money. I gain nothing from lending you money because I don't get an interest. I don't get anything from it. I'm just doing you a favor. Why? You want security. Palapachas. But when it comes to a sale, we're going to say that you always, life is full of risks when you buy something. Maybe I'll lose this property one day. Let's say there's no chais. But until the guy comes, until it goes of the tight and everything else, could be a year, 2, 3, 4 years, maybe I'll get the benefit from the property. And I get the benefit of all the fruits I took out of it and so on and so forth. And mechida for days also worth something. So therefore, and life is full of risks. Sometimes I win, sometimes I lose. So when it comes to sale, you need to ask the meicha, you're guaranteeing it, and so on and so forth. When it comes to a loan, you don't have to ask anybody because it's clear that the lender is doing the guy a favor. He wants security. Nobody throws money away. But people buy land for one day. People buy land for a day. Just before we go on, there's an interesting discussion here. Let's say there's no achrayis. Let's say the case where there's no achrayis. Okay, you sold something to Reuben sold to Shimon a property with no achrayis, and then the property is taken away by a Baal Chayv. Didn't put achrayis. So if you take it literally, it means that Shimon, that's it, he finished. He lost his property, he lost everything. So his taste is beferish not. It means that Shimon, when he goes back to Reuben and says, you owe me for the property I just lost, if Reuben has no assets, cannot go to any of the buyers from Reuben. You cannot go to Nechasim Mishabadim, but directly to Reuben, maybe you can go. Maybe or maybe not. So traces and you cannot get anything from Reuben. Not even if he has assets, doesn't have to reimburse you. More about a page. But if the property was stolen from you, if it turned out to be was a stolen property, sorry, if it turned out to be was a stolen property he sold you, comes out he never sold it to you. If he never sold you, the money that you gave him, what was that? A loan. That means your star mechida converted into a star of a loan. And a star of a loan, achrayis toisefru. So you can go back to not only to the person who sold you the property, you can even go back to the Chasim Shabbatim. Interesting. Okay, back to the Gemara. How do I know that? How do I know this from a loan and a sale? I'll tell you because once happened. He bought a beautiful property from his sister. Also, Balchoy came along one of her lenders and took it away from him. Also, the comment about Shmuel, he went to took his sister to the Nitaida. I will be reimbursed. A cost for the did you write that all in this sale that that she's responsible to take care of it? No. Gave for the hate. What an expression. Go peacefully. But you say that Chrais doesn't matter. When it comes to a loan, if you don't write it in the star, for sure he wanted the Chrais because you don't want to throw your money away. But now it comes to but people buy land even for a day because because the risk. Maybe you'll have it, it's a risk, but maybe I'll have it for a long time and I'll be able to eat the fruits and so on and so forth. Now is a number of didn't we have over the Abaye said. No. By the means an expression. Yeah, he knows exactly. It's a risk, but you think it's a small risk. You're happy. So the sale's a real sale. And you have to spell it out. Because we say that our people out there are happy to own the property for a short time. Amr Abaye said, Abaye. No, it's not. No, he wants to buy a property. Turns out he got taken from under his feet. Exactly. Okay, we had this in Baba Kama and a few other places. Amr Abaye. Reuven shemacha sadel l'Shimon b'chayis. Reuven sold the field to Shimon and he took responsibility. Reuven came on the lenders of Reuven, and he goes to Shimon and takes the property away because you own money. Dinahu, the din is the Ozil Reuven Reuven can go and help assist Shimon to defend himself. That the Balchav, you have no right to go and take the field from Shimon because I paid you back already, or whatever his defense he wants to use. Reuven can be involved in the case. Now, there's a big machlekes Rishonim. Can you? I'm the defendant. Can I have a lawyer standing there and defending my whole case? Not to sit next to me and help me out. You stand there and let him talk because he's a lot smarter than I am. Let him talk. It's called a Russian. Let him stand there and be my representative, or not. Big machlekes Rishonim. Why not? Because we know that if there's a maturgman there, the thing is that when can a Sanhedrin or Bezin have a maturgman interpreter, only if they understand the language, maybe they're not conversant in it, but they need to hear from the nitva, his tinus, they understand it, and then they have this thing. So the question is a Marasha worse than maturgman? Because you're not hearing the defendant. Is it a third party altogether? No, it can't be shlichus because he's the one who's coming up with all the ideas. Shlichus is I gave you all the case. So he's the one who's giving up the ideas. It's not a shlichus.
Assumption is that he's accepting what I'm saying.
The halacha is you cannot have. The halacha is you cannot have someone standing there and argue your case. However, the Tumim and others say that the Welt doesn't follow this halacha. It's very interesting. That the Welt already took on. You can have that since the today and today is allowed to have someone representing him. It's the defendant that we have to hear. So it's not even fair. It's stacked against the defendant. He can get the best barrister in the country, and you have to stand there and defend yourself. Yeah. So this Reuben is not coming as a to take over your place. It's coming to help you out. Come help me out. So and he's saying it. So can the lender say, I have nothing to do with you. You get out of this and tell you, I'm talking directly to Shimon. You have no right to be here. So he cannot be pushed out. Why? He says to him, the mafkin minye, the other. I'm in the game of it. I am about for him. I can say a few words as well, because if Shimon has to pay you the field, who do you think he turns around to? To me. So I'm involved. Now, so he's coming in not as a representative of Shimon, he's coming in to represent himself in a way. Now, the famous question all the Shem ask is, what's the Gemara's chiddush here? The din is that tainin and lelekech, tainin and labor will always give all the arguments that Reuben can give. We will help Shimon out that Shimon can give those same arguments. So what's the difference? What's the difference of Reuben's arguing that argument? What's the if we have Reuben standing there in the court and making an argument? No, Reuben's not represented. Reuben's coming to be involved as a co-defendant because he's saying if not real, come in. And if he's not a co-defendant, whatever time does Reuben have, we'll give to Shimon. So there's a few answers. Some want to say simply, what happens if it's a relative to Shimon? The aidem that we have to show that the loan was paid off is a relative to Shimon. So Shimon cannot bring these aidem to court. Shimon, the buyer, cannot because they're his relatives, but they're not related to Reuben. So Reuben can bring these aidem to court. So therefore, if Reuben is a defendant, he has to bring. If he's not a defendant, then Reuben is not here. You can't bring the aidem because they're cousins of Shimon. Other Rishonim say that can't be the case because at the end of the day, if Shimon pays out, then Shimon turns to Reuven. So the Aiden really are testifying about. If they're related to Shimon, if let's say even though they come in and help out Reuven, if Shimon loses the case, if they lose the case, then Reuven has to pay back Shimon. So they're really testifying about their cousin as well. He's in the loop. Others say no, because they're talking about the aidus of the loan was paid, and not even though as a result of that, Shimon gets involved, but that's not called aidus on Shimon. Others say that what happens if Shimon's a lot smarter, Reuben's a lot smarter than Shimon. He thinks on his feet. Shimon can't think on his feet. So therefore, if Shimon is a co-defendant, and we the Dayanim, can't come up with every single thing. Other than because Reuben knows better, and the lender won't have the chutzpah to lie to Reuben in his face, but to Shimon, his friend, he can say whatever he wants. What does he care? Others say, what happens if there's a Gilgul Shvuah? It means if he owes another Shvuah to Reuben about something else, then Reuben can make him swear Mahatayra, swear that you didn't pay me. Shimon has no ability, he couldn't do a Shvuah Hesses. and so on and so forth. Anyway, back to the mother. Even if Reuven does not have to reimburse him, and so therefore they for sure can say, La Baldoriat. I don't want you to have to walk around town saying I sold my property that tomorrow he lost. So therefore I have a right to be a co-defendant. Another day, Reuben sold the Shimon Reuben sold the Shimon and according to that, we're talking about a case, he didn't pay any money. The Yotzul Hasikim came along, these claimants who said, hey, the land is ours, is actually Hechiba. Before he made a Kinyan Chazaka, Yochel Lachzba can change his mind. And once he made a Kinyan Chazaka, any Yochel Lachzba cannot change his mind. Until it's actually taken away from him. You can't say the buyer can say, no, too many hassles, take your field back. Can't say that. The Amalek, the seller can say, Chayos the kitty, it's like a, the tide, what do you call when you have these like a booby prize, that you don't know what you're getting. You bought a sack full of nuts or whatever it is. I'm miserable. When's a chazaka, when you walk on the boundaries. Another say, I feel about chayis nami. Even a chayis, you can say, don't change your mind, even though I have to reimburse you. Show me that you lost the property, I'll pay you. Right now, nothing happened. You show me that the property was seized. People talk. I'll pay you then. Big problem here in the Rashi Shitta. If he didn't give any money, why can't you change his mind? And he didn't make chazakah. The Gemara tells you, if he didn't give any money, and actually he can change his mind. You need to tell me if I didn't pay you money and I didn't make a chazakah, I changed my mind. Why? I never bought it in the first place. And there's no Misha party here because nothing happened. Misha party is when you promised. Nothing happened. But here it's not Stam Deval. The reason why you want to walk away is like people are alleging that this property is stolen. Or this, you're going to lose a sikin, a stone. Yeah, so there's no Misha party. The Misha party, we have time. So why did you change your mind so all of a sudden? But here he has a good reason. And he has a good reason to change his mind because people out there claiming that this property you're selling me is stolen. So different cases and others learn money did change hands. But in a place where money does not define opinion. And that's why they want to ask. So what's this chazaka? We all know what a chazaka is, and chazaka is no part of shagada. You got to make a fence break over here. He just walks on the boundaries. So therefore, they say no. You gave money because you gave money. It's not final yet till we see that you take on ownership. You're walking on the boundaries together with the money you gave. Then you cannot change your mind. But if you look very closely in Rashi, interesting when he says mechidai shamitzi, which are normal taich is you walked on the boundaries. Rashi says misakin gevuli asoda umagbiyam. He did something. He didn't just walk. He did a chazaka. He did a chazaka. Exactly. He lifted the boundary. Whatever he did there, put more rocks there, which means that Rashi is also wondering here what's a chazaka. Anyway, let's get back to the Gemara. Itma we learned a very interesting machlekes. Somebody Reuben sold the field to Shimon. Could it be a stolen field? Okay, so what's it then? Obviously, Shimon can go back to Reuben and say, "Give me back my money." Rav Omar yesh mois. Of course, Shimon can go back to Reuben and give money, and also the yesh shvach. All the improvements in the field that happened, he can go back to Reuben and say, "You sold me $100 field, but since then, you know what I did? I did this, and it improved, and so on. I better yield." So he collects everything. But Shmuel is interesting. Mois yesh shvach. Shimon can only collect back the money that he paid out, but not the improvements on the field. Now, why not? First of all, what happens clearly, it said in the contract that if anything good happens, he's going to pay him out. Also, not only will you reimburse his money, the vendors wrote in the star, but he also said, I'll reimburse you for any improvements you make in the field. Time is the reason Shmuel Mishum let Peter Shvacha is the reason Shmuel because he just didn't spell it out. But over here in the contract they spelled out you'll reimburse him his improvements. I deal with time with the Shmuel. No Shmuel's what it is. Even the less like karka merzikidibus. Brilliant. I gave you $100 for the field. Turned out to be no such field because the field wasn't yours. So what? So I gave you a loan. I gave you a loan $100. If you're going to give me back 150, it looks like you're giving me ribbis. That's why you can't make mishra because there's no sale here in the first place. So what's Shmuel's pshat? Yes, then Velav no, Verafi biyade. He wasn't sure exactly what it was. Even we learned Omer Rav Nachman Shmuel, so that's why we say before was Rav Huna, because Rav Nachman says clearly, Rav Nachman Shmuel, Mois Yeshle Shvach Einlei, Afa Pisha Pila Shvach. Even if you wrote a clean in the star, my timer, even the Kaka Einlei is Charma Oisav Oimed Benaitel. He's getting interested, and turned out to be was alone, and if alone, you're getting interest. And that's what Tosha says there, that if it was taken, if there's no achrayis written in the star. Still, if it turned out to be was stolen, you can go back not only to the vendor to collect your money, but also to all the lekuchas aboard. Why? Because it's no longer a star mecher; it's now turned into a star halva. And by a star a loan contract, and by a loan contract we say achrayis is toy safer. You don't need to write achrayis. Fascinating idea. So here we have a sale contract turned into a loan contract. The contract itself changed. There's no contract. Finished. There's no contract yet. But here it says no, it's like a loan contract. So why else do you have the money in the other person's house?
The people who purchase afterwards, they look into this, right? To find out what
also now quotations, they have to look at also all the sales he made, not just the
and because it's something that's not known if it's going to happen, if someone's going to steal the land, there's always a possibility.
Exactly. And the problem is, exactly, quotation is very hard. So why would you ever buy a property? Can't protect yourself. As we'll see tomorrow later, anything you can't protect yourself. The only way.
Since Yeshua entered the land.
No, this person, if he hasn't never sold.
In other words, you should never buy the last property of somebody. That's the biggest risk. If you buy property, he still has other properties to sell. The chances that eventually you'll get to you is schwach. Because even if he sells it, they go to the later cook. I always say, you're not still have Malcolm Living man. So that's why you should never, and that's the general rule, you should never buy the last property of a person. So if a guy is desperate for money and he wants to sell the last property, he's going to have to discount it very heavily.
Executor's auction.
Exactly, or more. Something like that. Says what about so here we have the idea that a person protects himself. Rav asked a question: you do not take out from people who bought property from the kuches, la'achilas, paydas, to eat paydas. We'll see later. If somebody says you took my paydas, we'll see what the case of that is. So if the guy improved in the karka and he goes back to the person that owes him the money and he doesn't have, you cannot go to any of the people purchase property from that person. What the case is, we'll soon see. Or, for example, every man has to feed his wife and promise also to feed his daughters until the Bava Metzia, until they get married. And you cannot collect when after the person died. You cannot collect the chosher because people cannot protect themselves. Then nobody will ever buy anything. We need to protect. We need to protect the society, that we can have commerce, so we can have commercial transactions. If everybody knows that one day they might lose the property because every person is married, every person has children, and therefore they're going to have to feed their children. Let's say a majority of people have children; they have to feed their children, and so how can I ever buy a property? Also, I don't know how much to set aside. Do you know how much to eat, and what price the food will be in 10 years from now, and how long it'll go on for? Until you don't know anything, so you're not going. Why should I buy somebody else's property? We had this in Gittin. That's the tikkun olam. So it seems from here, it seems from here, okay, you cannot collect from the Shabbatim, but you could collect from the Chayim Mafkinin. You do collect from the Chayim. Now, what are we talking about here? And it says here, one of the things is shvach. Now, we think we're talking about here that the guy, it turned out to be the land was stolen. That is how we're going to shot it. The land was stolen. And the guy took, took the land away. He turns back to the vendor and says, the Shimon goes to Reuben, the vendor, and says, hey, give me back my money. So Shmuel says clearly here, you cannot collect the shvach from the Shabbat, but you could collect directly from the vendor. But before Shmuel said, you can't, because it turns out to be was a loan, and now this is interest. So state of Shmuel and Shmuel. It says clearly the shvach. What's the case? My love. Shimon bought from Reuben. Turned out to be that Reuben was a gazlan, and therefore, and now the nigzo comes and takes it away, and he turns back to him and says, "Give me my money and my shvach that I put in." And it seems that directly from the vendor, he can get it, he can collect. It's only not from Shabbatim. So I know we're talking about Balchayv here. A gazan you cannot collect the shvach because it turned out to be it's ribis. We're talking about here Balchayv. The Balchayv goes to the. So you actually bought it. So what happened with Balchayv? Very different. The sale was a real sale for 6 months. Let's say it was a real sale. And then what happened was, Reuben had it was a debtor. He owed money to different people. One of the creditors came along to Shimon, the buyer, and said, "Give me back the property. He owes me $150." And he takes the whole property with the shvach and everything else. Shimon turns around to him and says, "Reuben, you owe me not the $100 that I $150 because I put in money." So we treat it as if Reuben owed the money to the Balchayv. So instead, Shimon paid it up. It's as if Reuben bought the property back from Shimon now. So Shimon made a profit. There's no interest over here. It's not like there was never in Exela, there was never a sale. So why is Shimon's money sitting by Reuben turned out to be it was a loan? And if you're going to give Shimon more money than he lent you, it looks like ribis. Over here there was a proper sale. And what happened now is Reuben bought it back. It's as if Reuben bought it back from Shimon in order to pay the lender, the creditor. So therefore, Shimon can tell Reuben, you bought back a property $150 worth. Pay me today's price because of the shvach in there. That's the difference.
Just value, not
yeah, even input. Yeah, so yeah, there's actually a big machlek of shvach b'meila or shvach that you put in. But we won't go into it right now. The point is that he bought it back to him, so there's no ribbit there. Gemara says, "Ibal chayiv." That's the question. If it's about chayiv, we know that about chayiv, a lender can, when he goes to buyer to take seize the property, he takes the property and the shavach, the improved value, but he cannot take the yield. He cannot take the harvest, the crop. He cannot take the paytas. Big machlekes are showing him. What do you mean he cannot take the paytas? According to Rashi, it's only paytas that are fully ripe and about to be. They no longer need the land, so they're not considered part of the land. According to others, showing him is dafkiv, like the Yimagash. Dafkiv is cut off already, but it's sitting there, but it's cut off. So the Baal Chayv has no right to collect it, even though it came from the land. He has no right to collect it. Others say, even if it still needs the land, not it's fully ripe, still needs the land. Paytas are not part of the land. It's extraneous to the land, even though they come from the land, and they still need the land, but they're extraneous to the land, and therefore they cannot collect. Three opinions into the Shani. But regardless, it says here, Achilas Paytas can only be talking about. We're talking about how can you talk about Baal Chayv? Baal Chayv doesn't collect paytas. You're saying that Shimon, when he goes back to Reuben to collect, I lost my field, reimburse me. One of the things that he could have asked for is paytas. He cannot go Shabbat, but go to Red Door. But Baal Chayv doesn't collect. Baal Chayv had no right to take the paytas in the first place. So what Shimon going to Reuben and say, give me back my money for paytas? There's no paytas. Baal Chayv, Emeresha, says the Reisha, Eimatzin paytas. Baal Chayv, me eat the paytas fruits. As the Gemara, Shmuel said, Baal Chayv gave us a Shabbat. Says the Gemara, Baal Chayv collect a Shabach in paytas loy el pshita. So it's talking about begezel benigzel. So it's definitely talking about a gazan. Only by gazan does Shimon have the right to say to the vendor, you pay me also for my fruits. You sold me a stolen field, pay me for everything. Since it must be talking about gzela because it's paytas, they say we're not going to nigzel. So where does it say they're both talking about the same case? Hakadisa. First case is talking about gazan, but the second case that you talk about shvach, that's talking about Baal Chayv. Because there's no shvach by a gazan, because it's alone, look like it. Says you want to I looked in the Braisa, it's clearly different. It says in the Braisa explaining this Mishnah, the shvach kakois case. What's the case of shvach? How they should gozel. Now look at the words carefully because it's very cryptic. How they should gozel sodom mechavei. Reuben stole a field from somebody. How they he yotzim metachas yodi, and it goes out of his hand. Sounds like Shimon bought it. Kishu goive, when he collects, or doesn't say anything. All we know is when he loses the field. Now we're talking about the Gazan. When he loses the field, Kishu goive is a cat in the chashabadim. The cat in the principle he can go to the chashabadim, and shvach is going to chashabadim. And improvements he gets from directly from the person that he bought it from. What's going on here? Gazan collecting. Who's going to reimburse the Gazan? Hey, Chadami. Elam the kid take it literally. Gazan the man gobi. And starts to reimburse him. Elalav. We have to insert some words in the Braisa. Kigoin shagazach later. Reuven stole it. And he sold it to Shimon, and then Shimon proved it, and then Shimon lost the field, right? Shimon lost the field. No, the Nigzel came to Shimon and said, Shimon, it's my field, give it back to me. So Shimon gave it back. Now Shimon turns around to Reuben and says, give me my, so the cat and I can go to the Chasim Shabbatim because, it was a loan, but the Shvach, I go to you. Clearly you can collect Shvach. You're going to the Gaza. You said that the whole thing is a loan, it's a ribus, he cannot pay Shvach. But clearly he could. Amalek said, well, clearly. Lav he put words into the Braisa, so why can't I put other words in? I'll amend the Braisa as follow. We're talking about Baal Chayv. You decide on the Gazan. Take the word Gazan. We're talking about here about who's the. That's talking about Baal Chayv. Once you amend the Braisa, because if you take the Braisa literally, the Gazan is trying to get reimbursement. Can't be. So you decided you insert a whole new case. No, you introduced a Lakeach border from the Gazan. So I'm going to tell you, we're not talking about the Gazan at all. Amend the Braisa, we're not talking about the Gazan. We're talking about here a Baal Chayv.
Once you make your changes.
The guy bought it from a Baal Chayv. The same thing, but about Baal Chayv. Once you make amendments, why can't I make a few more amendments? Exactly. It's no longer accurate. Tashma coming here. Another Braisa. Achilas Peitus. Kate's explaining this mission here. What Achilas Peitus is, how they should gozel. You said Achilas Peitus is talking about. You said Achilas Peitus is talking about gazan, because it can be talking about. It cannot be talking about Bachai Peitus. Because this is how the Bryce learned. He stole a field in front. Again, the Gaza now lost the field. Who gave it when the Gaza now wants to get reimbursed? Gave us Akedem and the Chasam Shabbatim. Who paid this because Balchay can't be talking about that. You can't come back to me, tell me talking about Balchay, because Balchay doesn't collect. The lender has no right to take the payment. Now, what are you talking about? Elaine can try to take it literally. Gazlin and Mangavi, who's the collector from Elalav. He stole the friend, sold it to Shimon, and now Shimon wants, and he improved it. So we're talking about a Gazan and everything else, and he's going to get paid extra money. He's going to pay for the paytas, which is more than what he lent in the first place. We have a few answers. Omar Rabbi says, we're talking about this what happened. Reuven stole a field, Malaya paytas. It was full of fruits ready from the beginning. The paytas, he ate the fruits, the ganaf. He ate all the fruits, and furthermore, he ruined the field, so you can no longer give it back to the nigzel. Here, take your field, you ruined it. You got to burst it with money. Bon nigzel. It's not. There's no buyer here. It's between nigzel and gazlan. The nigzel now is the one who's asking for compensation, not the gazlan. The nigzel. Bon nigzel league boys, and the nigzel comes to the guys that pay me. Keren gave him the chasher bottom. He can no longer take the field back, so the Keren, the principal, he goes to the buyers. Bon nigzel league pay, but when the nigzel says, "Give me also the fruit was full of fruit when you stole it. Give it back to me." That gave him the chasher and the chayim. So there's no buyer involved there, just a nigzel and a gazan. And Yaitze B'tach is the other means the nigzel wants to take it back. He wants it back. That's all. Two people here. Rabbi Baravuna says almost the same thing. What happened was that people came along and goyim and forced the Gazlan to give it back to them. And we said last time, if it's a Makkah's Medina, if it's a Makkah's Medina that they took fields from everybody, the Gazlan can say, hey, what's if the fields by me or by you? They just took it. But if they came because of the Gazlan, no, he pointed out, hey, take this field if you want to take a field. Then the Gazlan has to reimburse the Nigzel. So Bon Nigzel. So now again, the same thing. The Nigzel came to collect. Is Keren gave him Choshesh Badi. Keren, he can no longer take the field back because it's no longer by the Gazan. The Goyim took it, but it's a Gazan's fault. So the Gazan has to reimburse the nigel. He can't go to anybody to collect it back. Who you can talk to? The Goyim and the Goyim over there, the Masikin. So he goes to the Gazan, reimburse me for the Keren, he goes to Shabadim, and Bonizal league was paid, he goes to Choshesh Badi. Rav Elam Karabadavuna. Why is Rav Elam like Rabbi Badahuna? We're talking about these Nasikin. Had a Yoitzim Metachas Yode Bedina Mashro, and it says here that Minhadin you take you can take the Keren here, not a Takana because the Goyim took it. You can take the Keren. Sounds like the Nigzel has it's from the Nigzel. The Nigzel goes to the Gazan. You have my field. I want my Keren. The problem is you cannot give me back the field the way it is because you ruined it. But it sounds like the field itself went out of his hand. What you're learning is the field was ruined. You have to pay money. Let's just finish. Gemara Rashi says, "Let's dudding Tani." We know it's talking about Balchay, we're talking about Gazan, and therefore part and part. Reuben stole it, Malay full of payers. He ate the payers. He sold to an old guy Shimon. So it depends. Oh, like even though it says Keren and Payers, we're not talking about the same case. Oh, like Keren, the Lekech wants the Keren if it's the gave him the Chashish Shabadim. But Nigzel, if the Nigzel comes, if the case of Gzela, it can't be the Lekech coming to collect Payers because it's Ribis. If the Nigzel now comes and says to the Gazan, "Where are my Payers? Leave the Payers. Gave them in the Chasim and the He takes in Chasim and the Okay. Anyway, so we'll stop in tomorrow. Doesn't mean that even though it seems like one case, we'll split it into two parts. One case is talking about the Leker going directly to the vendor, and the other one is the Nigzel going to the vendor. So the payers is the Nigzel going to the vendor, not the Leker. The Leker can't get money from the payers, although it looks like ribis. It's the Nigzel going for the payers and the Leker, but the Nigzel got his field back already. Now, when the Nigzel gets his field back, he does have to reimburse the Lekeach. Remember, if a guy goes in the field illegally, so whatever is less, the expense or the profit, you have to give him. So that the Nigzel has to give to the Lekeach. And we're talking about the difference between that and exactly the difference between that and whatever. Let's say